Right now, technically, we're live, so I'm going to hit this real quick. Oh, look. Take it away, man.
Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, and this is your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about vaping. Can it cause lung disease? Also, Illinois, what does it take to get an application? And top 5 cannabis scandals. On the line with us to help us digest all that is the Illinois lawyer, Tom Howard, and host of Cannabis Legalization News. Thanks for being on the Talking Hedge.
Thanks for having me, Josh. I appreciate it.
The top 5 cannabis industry scandals as the list of things that we just covered on the Yahoo Finance article of what to do, your checklist. You should be noting how to avoid risk, how to avoid being in the top 5 cannabis industry scandals. So kind of just diving into each one, you can kind of take away what to do and what not to do. Number 1 on the list is CannTrust, the most recent one. They publicly traded on the New York Stock Exchange. Basically, the executives, top level C-suite people knew that they were growing in unlicensed, unregulated rooms, essentially growing more than they were allowed to. Some of them may end up getting fines. I doubt any of them will go to jail, but plenty of people have been fired and their stock price has taken a hit.
Yeah, and that really stinks because the stock price taking a hit in a cannabis company is not like the stock price of, well, IBM's been on a tear for forever, just straight down. But IBM is still, relatively speaking, a liquid stock. You can get into GE too. GE just sucks. Like, you can get into and out of those companies, though, because they're quote unquote blue chips. But it can be very difficult sometimes to exit a position when you are in a cannabis stock, even a stock as large or as liquid as GTI or Cresco could probably be very difficult to exit. So I haven't even heard of this person's company. I'm not sure if they have penny stocks on them, but trying to get out of that position might have really hurt.
By the way, GE was just had a 7-month report from the same forensic accountant that was the first person to come out and say that Bernie Madoff was a Ponzi scheme.
Oh, good.
Same individual did a seven-month study and said GE is illiquid and fraud. They're committing accounting fraud. So right now that is just a rumor, but this guy's smart. I believe him 100%. I don't necessarily short equities, but that one would be one on my list.
Yeah, you could have pair traded that with a long of Amazon 10 years ago, and right now we wouldn't be talking in these surroundings. It would be a lot more palm trees that we'd be doing this podcast on. But yeah, you can't really go wrong getting out of GE.
Yeah. So number 2 on the list of top 5 cannabis scandals is Namaste Technologies. I'm not really sure what the deal is. I'm not really familiar with it, but the problems apparently began with promotional event featuring fake nurses in sexy costumes. So that didn't go over well with the quote bro culture, but essentially there was a short seller attack for some allegations that caused some board shuffling, some accusations that it was planning to list, and then fake claims on the NASDAQ listing. So essentially the guy that was running around during the Blue Herring 20-day run was selling stock and he shouldn't have been. So the simple takeaway is that the higher share price was on the back of a false report that he was running around. Kind of reminds me of some other companies right now trying to go public in the market.
They just have, but that gets back to, we just talked about how tenuous and difficult it can be to get a pro forma together for your cannabis startup. And yes, that can continue even up through the chain. And when do you really believe numbers, and how sophisticated are your average investors when it comes to reading the financial statements of these companies or even understanding how accounting practices are? I mean, is GE right now just a cluster of adjusting entries that really make no sense, and they aren't just doing accrual accounting? They're doing the stuff that Enron did, but on steroids or something.
Yeah. So Curaleaf got kind of busted because they didn't have an arm's length deal. They were selling $900 million deals to previous partners. And that same thing happened with Namaste Technologies. They had a couple $100 million deal with somebody who was, I don't know if he was a board member, but wasn't an arm's length party. So yeah. Anyways, moving on to Dolan Elements. It's another private company, and this is the same thing where he was running around trying to sell more stock and just pumping up with false reports. You can't give guarantees in the industry, and that's what he was trying to do, is basically just violating registration provisions by engaging in unregistered offerings of securities. So misleading representations and yeah.
So just basically like SEC fraud and stuff. I mean, where you're violating all these types of things that they say don't do. And then this again, if this is an American cannabis company, or was this a periphery, Namaste Technologies, so they aren't touching the plant, and in theory, now I was rejected by a bank recently because they called me a marijuana related business, but as an acronym because it's a bank, MRB Tier 2. And so a Tier 2 isn't actually touching the plant, but they're the next level of vendor. Like, we're selling services directly to the people that are touching the plant. And that got me deked. But I'm not sure if, Tier 2 MRBs can actually list on the stock exchange. So was Namaste Technologies allowed to literally get listed on NASDAQ, or did this whole thing blow up before then?
Namaste was private. And so I don't believe that they were planning on listing on NASDAQ. And so that's why he was trying to sell the arm's length deal, is to make it look like there was a higher valuation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
they'll do that. I mean, that's part of the game, because higher valuation usually means more money. And then if they're trying to get to market, why do a lot of entrepreneurs try to get to market? Because then suddenly, in the time that it takes to ring a bell and wait a few hours, you are richer than astronauts. And the only thing you had to do was lie through your teeth and then shop a whole bunch of money, which, those investors may have believed, but that is some of them, like Sarbanes-Oxley from 2002, where, what did you knowingly say? And that's one of the reasons why, we had a consensus, but we didn't really know anything, is a terrible defense. However, it's
can't either.
Yeah, I know. That's just the way that capital moves, and that's one of the reasons why you have these types of oversights. But you're not supposed to cook your books. You're not supposed to make your numbers say what you want them to say. You're supposed to make your numbers say what you believe you have a reasonable factual basis for them to say. And that's mostly, there's most fluff and BS before you're actually able to be public, because the amount of reporting requirements that you have to go through after then is substantially more. However, seriously, Beyond Meat is not worth what it is. That it ran up a lot. It's a great, wonderful story. I would short the heck out of it. I'm not sure if it has enough float to do that, but it's not worth a 500% run.
So it might taste good, but I don't know how healthy it is. I've seen hemp versions, and when we tested it, it was really high in sugar. And so if you have this product, it could taste like meat, but if it's not healthy, then even if it's plant-based, the number one ingredient is sugar, it's not going to get the traction it deserves. So yeah, I would short it too. I don't think it's going to last. Tradive is number 5 on this list of cannabis industry scandals. Tradive was an e-commerce site out of Colorado. They were a competitor to a company that we were starting up in 2017 called Xylem Marketplace, an e-commerce site started by a software development engineer from Microsoft who developed a Halo video game. And then I met him when he was at Amazon. And we went out and we got 75 LOIs in 2 days. People were really excited. We went up to Alaska and Spokane and Portland and Colorado, got all of these people interested. Never got off the ground. That team got distracted by a shiny squirrel that ran somewhere.
Yeah.
But Tradive ended up being successful. Problem is they started diverting product and selling it to the black market. So they were scaling up. They were getting really big. I didn't understand how or why. And then it came out where their California team was selling to the black market, and they just had to shut everything down.
That's strange, man. I haven't heard of that, but there's going to be a lot of tomfoolery in this industry, even with the amount of regulation. And so the amount of the regulation seems like it's really, really high to get in. in some locations. Illinois is one of them, Missouri is another one, where the barrier to entry is really high. But then you just have to buy the license after somebody won it, if you can buy it. And, they aren't going to look at your, I don't know what they're going to look at, actually, when you try to buy the license, whether or not Illinois will look at whoever's going to buy it is adequately capitalized, or if they just are going to be able to pass the background checks. There's going to be a lot of cannabis M&A, and there's going to be a lot of these companies that will continue to, because the profit margin and motive is so strong, lie.
We saw it up in Canada too, a publicly traded company. I went up to try and help automate to the pre-roll solutions, publicly traded company, Agroma Botanical, also known as Decent Industries. They're the only company to lose their license. They were publicly traded in Canada, but Health Canada came in, found that they were manufacturing product they weren't allowed to. They did it anyways. Health Canada came back 6 to 9 months later, and the result was that they lost their entire business. So some property, plant, and equipment was sold off, and everything fell apart. Because of why? Because of greed, or because you just wanted to. There was a big bag of cannabis that just had somebody's name on it, like Joe Schmo at some unlicensed dispensary. And then rumors that some biker gang was involved too up in Vancouver, BC. So I don't know anything about that, but I do know that that was a huge scandal. Should have been on that list. A lot of people lost money, including friends and family round. Feel really bad for some of the executives who were in charge, because they bought brand new houses, had babies, thought they were moving in one direction, and then a 180 kind of hit them in the face. But that's the lack of oversight. Those 5 things that we listed, where you need to have SOPs and security and all of these things with management that's going to hold you accountable, they didn't do it.
Yeah, and they make these types of things conditional in very competitive, restrictive licensing states, like they're going to be out east and in the Midwest. If you aren't doing those correctly, they can yank your license, and then suddenly, if you did, anticipate you'd have millions of dollars of cash flows going forward because you own a dispensary, and they just don't have very many of them, and everything's going to be easy, and you buy all these things, and then you're asleep at the wheel. Boom, it's gone.
Mm-hmm. So with that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. I want to thank Tom with Cannabis Legalization News. Appreciate your insight and everything. Hit us back. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't. And I'm out.